Hey guys, last week I came up with a concept, a short story for Halloween called The Lighthouse Killer. I like the idea so much that I wanted to elaborate into something a bit longer with different episodes. I also wanted to set the story in the town I was born, Boston, Massachusetts. I thought the scenery went so well with the story, and I wanted to set it in the 90s, or start it off that way. This story consists of bullying, secrets, covering things up, and of course, revenge. And what horror story wouldn't be complete without a twist? So, here it goes. The Lighthouse Killer, Episode 4. Oh my god. Now what? So, in the last episode, when David made it to the top of the lighthouse trying to touch the light, Brian stood in the way, preventing him to touch it so he wouldn't win the game. He swayed a fake axe, and David, out of reflex, stepped back on a shaky platform, making him slip and fall all the way down, screaming, going splat, landing on the rocks by the shore. That's where we are now. Brian, Rebecca, and Emily are looking at the body as the water is rinsing some of the blood off. Rebecca is panicking. Brian is trying to calm her down. Emily is looking back at the body, trying to think what to do. She turns back and looks at her boyfriend and asks him, "How did this happen?" But the reason why he thinks she's asking isn't the reason why she is. And he starts to get defensive because it was an accident. She had to remind him that she knew that he didn't mean to push him or even push him and believed him. But we have to get our story straight for the police. Brian then says, "Are you crazy? Don't you understand how bad this looks? Especially since we lured him here to play a prank on him. His bicycle is in my trunk." Emily forgot all about that, which meant they really had to be careful on how they were going to present a new crime scene to the police with all the details. Brian is also afraid that if the police start asking questions to Mr. Jacobs, their teacher, or the other students, it's going to seem like they targeted him. They've practically been fucking with him the past 2 years of high school. Rebecca then says, "And whose fault is that?" In this episode, you really see more of the enigma of Rebecca. We don't know where she stands, if she's a good guy or a bad guy. The panic and worry is coming from a genuine place, or is she looking out for herself or her friends? There's so many gray areas with her character, and sometimes with how she disguises it, she could be the worst of all of them. Rebecca reminds them that before they came to Pelican Bay, Mr. Jacobs saw them with David. Brian says that doesn't mean anything. Besides, he saw how cool we were with him. So if anything, that works to our favor. Emily, watching Brian and Rebecca contradict each other, worries her because they have to be on the same page. Brian then explains to the girls how in detail David fell from the lighthouse since they were on the sand. After he's done talking, Rebecca asked him, "Why didn't you pull him forward?" And he says, "There wasn't enough time." Rebecca goes on to saying, "Well, maybe your accident is going to ruin our lives." This starts a verbal fight between them two, while Emily heard a noise come from behind the pier. She tells them to hush to see if she could hear it again, but nothing. They start to make different assumptions while Emily tells her boyfriend to go to the pier and check out the noise or where it came from. While he does that, Rebecca continues to point out what has happened. Emily says a few words and manages to calm her down. Brian, like a clown, shouts out the ghost is clear as his girlfriend calls him an idiot, at least making a laugh come out of Rebecca. When he comes back, he tells Emily maybe it was a fish she heard. Rebecca, while looking back at the body, thinks of an idea, especially from what David told her when they were drinking the Smirnoffs, elaborating. I have an idea for an alibi. Think about it. He told you, looking at Brian, that he would come here sometimes to do his homework by himself, which only a lonely person would do, right? Looking back at Emily. When you asked him if he was interested in anyone, if he had a crush in school, he didn't answer, so that means no. When he told me about his father beating him up because he was gay and how his mother's defended him using her fingers to do the quotations, he was being bullied, it pushed him to the edge of suicide. Emily and Brian were so impressed by Rebecca's idea. It was so believable, especially with how all the pieces of the new puzzle she created coincide with his life. The last thing Emily wanted to know was if either Brian or Rebecca touched his body when they were with him, not realizing that she actually was the one that touched him when she was drinking. They continued to set the new crime scene while Emily mentioned to Rebecca that this was between them. Not even Dean could know. And so she promised. Stay tuned for the next episode.